Putin's invasion of Ukraine was going to be a quick victory. 3 days, he said,
За победу!
Hurrah! But it's more than 3 years ago now. Russia's casualties are just enormous.
President Putin has made a big mistake, and that is to launch a war, to wage war against an independent sovereign nation.
900,000 men lost, and Russia is withholding the truth from us. Mass graves are being dug up on the front line. Why? Because the Russian army isn't performing well. Ukraine has been turned into hell for Putin. In this video, we'll uncover how Ukraine wiped out nearly 1 million Russian soldiers, what went wrong for Russia, and what does this mean for the future of the war? Stick around to find out. Now, Putin invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Putin pledged an 8-day campaign would be over in 3 days. He thought that the Ukrainians would welcome Russian soldiers as liberators. There are even Russian soldiers packing parade uniforms to celebrate in Kyiv. But all of this never happened. Ukraine fought hard. What was to be a quick military victory turned into a long, bloody war. Russian soldiers were not prepared for resilience. Instead of a quick victory, they encountered courageous soldiers, well-fortified defenses, and a people united against them. With every month that passes, Russia's hope of an easy victory is dashed. The war that was to be over in a matter of a few days has now lasted 3 years. Putin's plan boomeranging in a way nobody could have anticipated. Once thought to be powerful, the Russian forces have been stretched to breaking point and exposed as seriously imperfect. The actual cost of Putin's invasion is becoming ever harder to hide. Russian casualties have risen exponentially, with the figure now standing at more than 900,000 troops, dead and injured. It's a number that's simply staggering, giving us some sense of the sheer brutality of this conflict. The UK Minister of Defence has now released a report that indicates that between 200,000 and 250,000 Russian soldiers have been killed since 2002. These are Russia's biggest losses since the Second World War. And it doesn't end there. The Russian army is incurring heavy casualties every day. The ground situation, well, it's just grim, and Putin's regime is struggling to hide it. Mass graves are also becoming a feature of the barren landscape. Russian troops are being buried in mass graves along the front to avoid having to report the numbers of their dead. Soldiers who have been killed are even being maintained alive on paper, so their families continue to receive benefits. The Russian administration, however, is doing everything in its power to hide the actual scale of the tragedy. But with such huge numbers, the reality cannot be refuted. Russia is paying a colossal price for a war that was believed to be simple, but soon turned into a nightmare. Putin's strategy has been gruesome. Send wave upon wave of soldiers into battle, no matter how many die. His goal is simple: gain territory, no matter what. Russia often uses a meat waves tactic. They send poorly trained soldiers to the front line first. They act as flesh shields, hoping to wear down Ukrainian soldiers. When the first wave is exhausted, more heavy armed troops replace them. The strategy relies on raw power, not training or precision, and it has extracted enormous tolls in terms of casualties from Russia. This plan serves to illustrate Putin's contempt for the lives of his soldiers. He's happy to lose them to gain petty victories on the battlefield. And as Russia keeps recruiting more soldiers, most of them are from impoverished regions with less opportunities. Most of them have no choice but to sign up, knowing what risks they face. The result? More and more lives are being lost, with precious little tangible accomplishments to show for it. The high Russian casualty rate can't be explained without considering the social and economic circumstances in Russia's poorer provinces. The majority of the army consists of ethnic minority soldiers from rural areas where there are very few career prospects. Outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, the two main cities, these provinces experience high unemployment and low wages. Russia's military offers massive bonuses to draftees for those areas, making it a sought after, if dangerous, option for many. For most of Russia's young men, military service is the only way they can make money. Their economic necessity makes them bet their lives on the battlefield. The social damage is also tremendous. Russian households have to bear the losses of brothers, fathers and sons, typically in wretched remote locations, lacking much to complain about it. These communities are still disappointingly impacted by the war. Putin's priorities are self-evident. Rural communities and minority groups are disproportionately affected by the war, and wealthier Russians are relatively unharmed by the war. Russia's military is deteriorating, not necessarily because of numbers, but because of a lack of preparation. Several soldiers have less than 2 weeks of training before being sent onto the front line. Compared to US soldiers trained for months in preparation to enter combat, this lack of preparation is being realized in the war. Russian soldiers generally lack fundamental skills. They have no idea about weapon handling or field work. Even tasks like map reading or radio use are huge issues. Their inattention to basic training makes them vulnerable to stronger Ukrainian forces. The second issue is poor coordination. Russian troops are generally poorer coordinated and no units communicate appropriately with each other. This leads to confusion and missteps in the war. Instead of coordinating, Russian troops are often left vulnerable to Ukrainian counterattacks. The result is enormous loss with very little to show for it. Ukraine is prevailing in significant battles for many reasons. First, it's well trained. Ukrainian soldiers have the expertise and skills to combat Russian soldiers. They also know how to employ advanced weapons like drones and artillery to the fullest extent. Secondly, Ukraine has strong defense strategies. It will strengthen the strategic location and respond with precision. Urban warfare strategies allow it to turn cities into strongholds of resilience, making it hard for the Russian forces to advance. Third, morale is high in Ukraine. They're fighting to protect their land, homes and families. This motivation gives them an edge over Russian troops, who too often lack the same motivation. Finally, Ukrainian soldiers have better coordination. They don't work chaotically as Russia does. Their coordination has helped Ukraine resist Russian forces, reclaim lost territories and advance in strategic areas. These are the factors determining Ukraine's triumph in this evil war. There's been a horrific human price for the war in Ukraine. Thousands of lives have been lost on both sides, but it's Ukrainian civilians who have paid the heaviest price. Children, women, men, they've been driven from their homes, their families torn apart by death in bombing, artillery strikes, and just the war in general. Ukrainian soldiers fight not just for a win, but for survival. With every battle come more victims, and every fight is deeply felt across the country. Cities turn into mere rubble, and entire districts become smouldering rubble. Unarmed civilians caught in the middle of crossfire struggle to survive from day to day. The cost in terms of psychology is vast. Children are being separated from their families, schools are being razed, and society is being disintegrated. Every day, the casualty list increases. The human toll of this conflict is a tragedy that will be reminded by generations to come. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has caused disastrous losses, with nearly 1 million Russian soldiers injured or killed. The determination and strategy of Ukraine have continued to turn the tables despite Russia's enormous casualties. The cost of human lives is vast, and its impact, well, it's going to be seen for decades.